BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. One of the cases on this channel that we had been covering was the case of Inyoung, and this was involving sort of an involuntary manslaughter charge that she had received surrounding the death of her ex-boyfriend Alexander Urtula. And this is something that I mentioned that we don't do too often about following cases that are still going on, like chasing the news, so to speak. But Inyoung was a South Korean national, but she was in South Korea at the time of the charges, and they were trying to extradite her back to the United States using something called the Interpol Red Warrant. But we do have a new development that Inyoung has returned to the United States to face the trial for the death of her ex-boyfriend Alexander Urtula. And to get this as kind of accurately as possible, we have an article here from the South China Morning Post, and we're just going to read this thing in its entirety. We also don't typically do that. We discuss lots of articles, but we really want to get the narrative kind of as solid as we can, because once again, this is an ongoing case, and there could be new developments, or the news could even revise some things that they have kind of made public that they don't currently agree with. But once again, let's just read something from the South China Morning Post. Inyoung back from South Korea to plead not guilty over U.S. boyfriend's suicide. Ex-Boston College student is accused of encouraging Alexander Urtula to take his own life in what prosecutors describe as a toxic and abusive relationship. She is said to have sent boyfriend thousands of expletive-laden text messages calling him worthless and texting him to kill himself. A former Boston College student entered a plea of not guilty on Friday in her first court appearance on charges that she encouraged her boyfriend to take his own life in what prosecutors described as the toxic relationship. Inyoung delivered the plea of not guilty to involuntary manslaughter in Suffolk County Superior Court in Boston, after prosecutors say she voluntarily returned to the United States from South Korea, where she has been since the charges were announced in October. Okay, so as you see, though, they didn't even need the warrant. They did want to extradite her through the Interpol Red Warrant, but she voluntarily came back from South Korea. Yu, dressed in a white sweater and black pants, did not speak during the proceedings. She was taken into custody in handcuffs after the judge set her bail at $5,000. She soon posted bail afterwards. Yu, who was born in South Korea, is a naturalized U.S. citizen and was ordered to surrender her passport and remain in Massachusetts. Her next court date is in January, and her case will not go to trial until November 2020. Well, those are some of the kind of newest updates that we have regarding this. I think it's very important to note that she is also an American citizen, probably dual nationality, as you see here. So I kind of wonder if that would have affected her decision to return to America to face these charges, because I was during the original articles that we went through the last time we talked about Inyoung, I mean, they made it very clear that she was a South Korean national, and I was like, why is she returning to face charges? I mean, like, to face the trial at all? Because, as we said with extradition law, almost no nation in the world is required to surrender their citizens, and that's why they had to go about this in the things such as the Interpol Red Warrant. But as you see here, she voluntarily went back to face the trial. Prosecutors say Yu and Alexander Urtula, age 22, of Cedar Grove, New Jersey, exchanged more than 75,000 text messages in the last 2 months of their 18-month relationship, with Yu sending the majority of them. Now, there's a big thing we want to say here about this, because I was watching NBC News, and they just brought up this case. They just decided to start talking about Alexander Urtula and Inyoung. I wasn't looking for it online. They were just discussing this on the evening news. And they actually offered a different thing about this. What they said was that Alexander Urtula had exchanged 75,000 messages completely, like to everybody he was texting, not only to his ex-girlfriend. And almost all sources report that he sent 75,000 text messages to Inyoung, and 47,000 of them were deemed like abusive or deemed like something that is psychologically detrimental to his health. But on NBC News, and once again, this is just one news report with some conflicting information, but they said he sent 75,000 text messages to all of his contacts. That was all of his interactions. 47,000 of them were involved with Inyoung, and like their correspondence totaled 47,000 text messages. Just bringing that up because we have some conflicting reports. They say Yu isolated Ortula from his friends and urged him multiple times to go kill himself and called him worthless in a constant barrage of text messages. Ooh, even just hearing that, though, I mean, that's a night. And once you see the conclusion, you see the culmination, that this ended in a suicide. I mean, that is just, even that alone is a very nasty thing to do. During Yu's arraignment, Assistant Prosecutor Caitlin Grasso said the two Boston College students had met through the university's Filipino Student Society. Not a minute of any day goes by without those who loved Alex grieving continually and feeling the sharp pain of his passing. That, of course, is a statement from the Ortula family. But Yu said she became upset after learning that Ortula was still communicating with others. And Grasso read from some of the thousands of text messages Yu sent to Ortula, many laden with expletives and sent in one-word bursts and capital letters. She also detailed how Yu, who withdrew from the university over the summer, forced Ortula to block his friends on social media, regularly monitored his location through his smartphone's GPS. Well, I mean, these things here, though, this is not looking good for her. Once again, she is charged with involuntary manslaughter, and this really is not looking good for her once you sort of see that she's not only saying the words, she's also cutting him off from his friends and following him on social media. And we were even having some conversations about this recently. I was just talking to people about the thing with GPS and the telephones, and someone just asked me once recently, why can't you see the location of everybody on their cell phone, when you're talking to them? Why can't you see their location? And then I remembered a few conversations that we had several months ago, and somebody was just like, what about, someone who's trying to escape an abusive partner in a relationship? Would you really want them to be able to see their GPS location? GPS can be very dangerous if other people have access to it, and they can see where you are when you don't want them to. But the defendant became physically, verbally, and psychologically abusive. So far, she hasn't detailed the physical abuse that Alexander Ortula would have encountered. Ortula had no mental health problems prior to the relationship, Grasso said, but in the months before his death, he had written in his journal that Yu attacks his self-worth. He also said he feared leaving her because she threatened to harm herself and blame him for it. Well, that's also not looking good for her. And, because the case that the prosecution is trying to make is that she was so psychologically abusive that she encouraged him to commit suicide. And it's tied into that. They say that they have direct text messages saying that she told him to kill himself. And as we mentioned on the previous upload about Inyoung, language that leads to immediate violence is not protected under freedom of speech laws. That is the absolute biggest exception. Not all forms of speech are protected. They say, yes, freedom of speech, but with limits. There are definitive limitations to that. He also feared, we mentioned that one. These text messages demonstrate the power dynamic of the relationship, she said. The defendant, Mr. Ortula, discussed how the defendant owned Ortula, how he was her slave, how Mr. Ortula ceded his autonomy to the defendant as a condition of the relationship. It's not looking good for her in this context. The two had been together the morning he died, and Yu knew nearly an hour before the place that Ortula was going to kill himself. The place where Ortula died, where Yu had earlier threatened to kill herself. So once again, she's still making the threats that she is going to commit self-harm if he leaves her. A full accounting of the couple's more than 75,000 text messages has not been released, but Yu, through a public relations firm, released messages this week that she tried to stop Ortula and was in contact with his brother moments before his death. And this is the reason why they mentioned this on NBC News, because it seems that there is also some sort of additional things that were left out from the original news coverage. And that is that Inyoung was also sending messages like we're about to read now. Please, baby, I'm almost there. Please, she wrote. Please don't push me away. Please don't leave me. And they're sort of saying that that is kind of indicative of someone who was trying to stop him from committing suicide, that she wasn't a manipulator, she wasn't trying to actually get him to kill himself. In fact, she's the person discouraging him from committing suicide. So, excuse me. Urtula responds at this point, "This is goodbye forever. I love you. This isn't your fault, it's mine." Now, one of the things that I had thought about was that why would Inyoung voluntarily come back to the United States? Well, I mean, what we mentioned before, they might have extradited her anyway, and that would look bad for her case. Maybe the lawyers thought that she could beat the trial and that she could win this thing, because they do have text messages like this. "This isn't your fault, it's mine." And the defense teams might pounce on stuff like that and be like, hey, we can win this thing. This guy clearly says that he wants to commit suicide, and she's clearly saying that she is trying to stop him from committing suicide. After Friday's proceedings, Yu's lawyer Steve Kim dismissed the case as a cheap pursuit of headlines that has wrongly portrayed his client as a monster. Yu and Urtula were emotionally needy young adults who contributed to turning their relationship into a toxic blend of need, anger, fear, and love, he said. They live their lives entirely on the phone in a way that many of us who are older find hard to believe. But still, though, if she encouraged him to commit suicide thousands of times, once again, we're dealing with at least 47,000 text messages, and it sounds like thousands of them are related to psychological abuse. If she committed him to, or encouraged him to commit suicide thousands of times, that might be crossing the lines into illegal territory, and she still might be found guilty. Prosecutor Rachel Rollins responded to Yu's representatives that are trying to change the narrative around her reckless behavior. Urtula's relatives said they are devastated by his death. Since losing Alexander in May, the Urtula family and everyone who loved Alex has been devastated by his loss, the family said in a statement, ahead of Friday's proceeding. Not a minute of any day goes by without those who loved Alex grieving and continually feeling the sharp pain of his passing all over again. And this is one thing that I think has no exaggeration. Their family member committed suicide, and under these very bizarre circumstances, they probably are genuinely dealing with this every single day. The case grimly echoes that of Michelle Carter, who garnered headlines as an HBO film. And we mentioned her a little bit in the previous upload, I believe, but we have to be very clear that is a different case. The young Massachusetts woman was sentenced to 15 months in jail after she was convicted in 2017 of involuntary manslaughter for using text messages and phone calls to encourage her boyfriend, Conrad Roy, to kill himself in 2014. Well, you see something right there. It's like they have had convictions for this in the past, and this is also from the state of Massachusetts. Right now, it's not looking very good for Inyoung, but it would really depend on the way that these proceedings go out. It seems like the defense team is very confident, and one of the things that we do deal with in the legal system in the United States of America is the concept of reasonable doubt. And I believe, though, that the mainstream media really did want to vilify Inyoung as a monster. Why? Because that's what the mainstream media does. And this is something that is definitely going to be sort of a clickbait headline for a lot of people. But the issue is, it's not about us as the viewers and in the audience. The issue is, did she break the law? During the initial news reports that we were reading the first time on this channel, I don't think once did we find anything about how she was discouraging him from committing suicide, that she's telling him, oh baby, please don't do it, please just wait for me. So you really see, though, there's a little bit of distortion on the media, but does that mean that Inyoung is innocent? No, absolutely not. It would really depend, though, if you really had all 47,000 text messages that they were talking about, and you could see sort of what was going on. And the prosecution really seems like they're trying to make the heart and soul of their case. Did this guy commit suicide because he was so psychologically abused, in addition with her making statements that are an immediate act of violence? Go kill yourself is an immediate act of violence. It's telling him to commit suicide and to bring physical harm upon himself. And once again, that is not protected under, it's like various laws connect to that, but it is not protected under freedom of speech. There are limitations to that. So you really have to just see, though, where is this really going to go? Will Inyoung be found innocent? Because, it's a messy situation. And right now, I know it's not really the best thing to say, but it's like the situation isn't very clear. I can't tell you definitively if she will be found guilty or not guilty. One of the other reasons why she probably came back from Korea to face these charges in a trial is she's allowed to be free during the time of release. I mean, they posted the $5,000 bond, which is very low. I mean, we see cases where people have $1 million, $2 million bail. I mean, that's rather low. And the other thing is that she's allowed to live freely outside of prison. I mean, so she has those kind of possibilities. And if the defense team is very confident that she can win this, and maybe it's just going to look good for her case if she chooses to go back and face the trial, there could definitely be some sort of motivations like that. But I would like to ask you guys right now, what do you think about the case of Inyoung? Do you think that she will be found guilty of involuntary manslaughter? And do you believe that her actions sending these verbally abusive and psychologically abusive text messages led to the death of her boyfriend? If you have anything to say at all about this case, or just about how the legal system functions in general, I would love to hear from you. And please drop a comment below. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button, and I would love to talk to you guys some more. Until next time.